You know, every project gets to this make or break moment, the point where you have to pick an outside partner. And let's be real, the quality of your entire project is now completely tied to the quality of that vendor you choose. So, okay, let's dive into how the pros get this right every single time.
The classic dilemma, isn't it? You get a bid that's way, way lower than all the others. Is it a screaming deal or a massive red flag? You know, the biggest mistake I see junior managers make is just assuming that the best vendor is always the cheapest one.
And right here, this is the core idea of this entire explainer. That initial price tag, it's just one tiny piece of the puzzle. A cheap, unqualified partner can cause delays, rework, and what we call technical debt, which is just a fancy way of saying you'll be paying a fortune later to fix their shoddy work. So the key takeaway is this: we're hunting for the best value, not the lowest price.
So to find that real value, we can't just rely on a gut feeling. We absolutely need a disciplined, structured process. And this is where the integrity of your selection method becomes your project's #1 asset.
The official term for it is source selection. Honestly, just think of it as being the final, most important gate in the whole procurement process. If you mess this part up, you're basically rolling out the red carpet and inviting risk right into your project before you've even started.
So how do we guard that gate effectively? Well, we use logic and objectivity. See, professionals have developed some really smart tools, designed specifically to strip out personal bias and emotion, forcing a decision that's based purely on data and what's best for the project.
And the main tool in that toolbox is what we call source selection criteria. These are literally the rules of the game that you create before you even lay eyes on a single proposal. And, this is crucial, you share these rules with all the potential vendors. This levels the playing field, creating a fair competition where everyone knows exactly how they're going to be judged.
Now here's where it gets really powerful. We bring those criteria to life using a weighting system. As you can see in this example, for a really complex job, price might only be worth 30% of the total score. Things like technical skill and past performance are actually weighted higher. This forces you to look at the whole picture and stops you from getting dazzled by a low price tag.
All right, let's make this real. Let's put this system to the test with an example. Imagine we're building a massive high-rise tower, and we need to hire an electrical firm for the high-voltage grid. I mean, this is a critical, super high-risk job.
So, we get 3 proposals. Alpha Electric is by far the cheapest, but their proposal is kind of vague about safety testing. Then you've got Beta Systems. They're the most expensive, but they have a perfect safety record and tons of experience on projects just like this one. So, how do we choose without just flipping a coin?
We use the matrix, and this is where the magic happens. Look how this illustrates the power of our weighting system. Sure, Alpha Electric gets a perfect 10 for price, but they get a dismal 4 for safety, our most important category. Beta Systems, on the other hand, gets a perfect 10 for safety even though their price score is low. When you do the math, Beta Systems is the clear winner. See? This isn't just picking a vendor, it's actively managing risk. We're basically buying insurance against a catastrophic failure.
Now, for those even bigger, more sophisticated projects, there's another layer of objectivity we can add to the process. It's like an extra line of defense to protect the decision.
It's called the 2-envelope system. Sellers submit their technical proposal and their price proposal in 2 separate sealed envelopes. Now here's the clever part. The evaluation team scores the technical stuff without knowing any of the prices. This completely eliminates price bias. Because if a vendor can't actually do the work, who cares what their price is, right? Only the vendors who are technically qualified get to move on and have their price envelope opened.
Okay, so let's boil all this down to the core principles. These are the non-negotiable pillars you need to know, both for doing this in the real world and for crushing any certification exam.
So here's a classic ethical test. You run the numbers, you do the whole matrix, but the vendor you have a great relationship with, the one you personally wanted to win, didn't come out on top. What's the right move here?
The answer every single time, without exception, is this one. You must follow the process. If you start changing the weights or ignoring the scores after the fact, you've just destroyed the entire system's fairness and transparency. Not to mention, it could open up your company to some serious legal challenges. The process is king, period.
And remember, this objective process is backed up by other pro techniques. Things like having your own internal cost estimate to keep bids honest, using a simple screening system to weed out the unqualified right away, and doing real due diligence, not just calling references. It all leads to a fair, win-win negotiation because a successful long-term partnership is the real prize.
Okay, so let's lock this in with our 3 key pillars. Pillar number 1 is all about objectivity. Your preset criteria and your weighting system, that's the foundation for making a decision based on real, measurable value, not just a cheap price.
Pillar 2 is your reality check. Having your own independent estimate keeps everybody honest. And a good screening system is like a bouncer at the door. It makes sure you're only spending time evaluating the serious contenders. And finally, Pillar 3 is all about integrity. A transparent, fair process that ends in a negotiation aimed at building a real partnership. That's what separates amateur hour from professional project leadership.
So now you have the framework. You can choose the right partner with confidence and with objectivity. But selecting the vendor is just step 1. What happens next? When you have to get into the weeds of financial incentives, sharing ratios, and ceiling prices, how do you master the complex numbers of the contract? Well, we'll tackle that in our next explainer.